So it's whatever you want to talk about. We're limited with our tape to 60 minutes. Today is September 5th, 2008. We're at the Mary L. Cook Public Library, Waynesville, Ohio. Today we are interviewing Bernnie James Leland. And Mr. Leland, if you could just give us a little introduction to your background and the circumstances when you entered the service.
I'm from northern Minnesota originally. My father was a school teacher. I grew up in northern Minnesota and graduated from high school in 1966 and went to the University of Minnesota and graduated in aerospace engineering in 1971, and I spent the last 2 years in college in Army ROTC, what they call the 2-year program. And I graduated in 1971 and received a regular Army commission, Air Defense Officer, U.S. Army. And I went to Officer Basic School in Fort Bliss, Texas. And then I had orders for the 32nd ADCOM, which was in West Germany at that time. So I went to a Hawk site in Illesheim, West Germany, which was near Würzburg and west of Nuremberg. And I was in B Battery, 2nd to 57th Air Defense Artillery. I was part of what they called the Hawk Belt, which they had all these Hawk batteries, surface-to-air missiles all up and down the east and west German border. And our mission, we had an actual mission. We were told states of alert, and we were always on duty and with our missiles, and our mission was if any Warsaw Pact country airplanes came across the border and declared hostile, we were the first ones to engage them and shoot them down. Behind us was Nike Hercules, which protected the big installations in West Germany. So we were in the front. I think there was 32 batteries in the Hawk Belt, 32nd ADCOM. And so then I did everything in the battery from platoon leader to battery executive officer and battery commander. And then I got out of the service in off of active duty in February 1975. Went to graduate school at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, and got a master's degree in mechanical engineering, and then came to work for Procter & Gamble in 1976. And while I worked for Procter & Gamble, I maintained my commission in the reserves. And the reserves, I was what they called a MOBDES officer. MOBDES is a mobilization designee, and the whole idea was that if ever there was a declaration of war, these MOBDES officers would go to certain installations in the U.S. and basically help with the running of the installation. So I went to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, which is in Aberdeen, Maryland, and I was there for 8 years. Did my tours there for 8 years, and worked on a lot of Army equipment. I worked on the M1 battle tank, on the 120mm gun. I worked on, did a lot of work on the 120mm gun. And then I did that for 8 years, and then I got a new assignment to the Army Missile Command and Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, which is where NASA is, and worked on missile intelligence. So did a lot of work with the what missile technology was being applied across the world. So I did that for 8 years, and then I achieved 20 good years of service and retired Lieutenant Colonel in 1996, I believe. And then I retired from Procter & Gamble in 2006. So now I'm retired.
Okay. What basically was your motivation for entering the service? Was it because of the ROTC benefits, or was it just something that you had desired to do, or?
Well, the primary motivation was I had a low draft number. So they had the draft lottery in those days, so I had a low number. So I was going, so I decided that if I was going to go in, I was going to go with an education. I was going to go in as an officer.
In case we have some younger people watching this, can you explain a little bit about how the draft lottery worked in those days? Because that's not something we've had recently.
Well, the county, when I was in Chisago County, had a draft board, and there was a national lottery, and depending on when your birth date was, you got a number, and my number was 105, and so what that number was is if you had number 1, you would be the first one drafted. So those numbers then go into, you had to register with your local draft board, and then I guess each county had a certain quota to fill, and so they would go down and who had the lowest and the highest number. So in that year, I think my county got up to 250. So anybody who in that county who had a lottery number less than 250 was drafted, unless you got a deferment. And one of the big deferments was, or a way to get a deferment was to be in ROTC.
And this was at the height of Vietnam.
Right, this was in when did they start that? 68, 69, something like that. Then while I was in the service, and so I got out in 75, but along about 73 or 74, they did away with the draft altogether. Went to what they called the Volunteer Army.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your day-to-day activities. What was a normal day like in a particular assignment?
Well, in the B battery, we had 2 launcher sections with we had 36 missiles. We had 18 missiles on launchers at any time, and then we had these radars that we would track targets with, track airplanes. We had an acquisition radar. We had a continuous wave radar that would you would acquire the target with the acquisition radar, and then you transfer it to the target tracking radar, which then would track the target. And what it actually did was it would illuminate the target with RF energy that would glance off. Then when you launched the missile had a little homing device in the front that would seek that waveform and track it right down to the target and blow the target up. So every day we would go through all kinds of checks on our radars, making sure that they would work. We did all kinds of crew drills, both control and also on how to launch a missile. We would had security, so we had to provide perimeter security around our battery, so we had to have guards posted, and so we would do that. It was a busy time, and most of the time we were concerned with making sure our equipment was functional, and so we did a lot of preventive maintenance and a lot of crew drills, I'll call them, to make sure our people were trained to fire a missile. And then once a year we had what we called snap training. I forget what that stands for. We would fly and take a part of our battery, fly down to the island of Crete in the Mediterranean, and actually fire a missile at a drone target. So they would launch a drone, which is an unmanned aircraft, and we would actually go through a crew drill and actually fire a missile at that target, just so everybody gets a chance to really shoot one.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd do that, and we'd actually fire 2 missiles, and we did that 3 years while I was over there.
Now, did you actually feel like you used your engineering training in your job, or not necessarily so much?
To some extent, and most of that stuff was electronics, so it's all the aerospace aspect of missiles was already done, so, but it is mostly electronics, maintenance of those radars, which was a big problem to keep them things operational.
What sort of things did you run into?
Well, they broke a lot. I mean, they were very delicate instruments. We had, our radars were what was called continuous wave radars, which were even more difficult to maintain, but they offered an advantage in tracking targets in the electronic warfare, where you had or tracking targets that were hidden by or masked by terrain features and stuff. So they were just very, very hard to keep them operational.
Did you have a lot of in-service type training that you also had to do while you were in the service? I'm sure you did. Very specific training.
Yes, an officer basic school, Air Defense Officer Basic in Fort Bliss. We learned all about those radars and crew drills. And the other thing too is we had a manual that was, I don't know, 6 inches thick, that had all the rules of engagement. So you had to know that, you know, when's the target hostile, when's it not hostile. You had to learn how to read. They still do this. They have, it's called an RF code that that the airplanes today still use. They squawk a code so you know who they are.
Okay.
It's called IFF, identification of friend or foe. So you had to learn how to read those things, and you had to spend a lot of time learning all the rules of engagement, and there were a lot of them. You can imagine over Western Europe, there's all these spaces that were hostile and not hostile, and friend or foe. And so we had spent a lot of time doing that, got tested on that all the time, had to make sure we were always current. We always got, we were one of the few branches of service that actually had a mission. So we, on our attack side, we all got all the intelligence information. So we had to, so when anything happened, we would know about it right away. For instance, in 1973 was the Yom Kippur War in Israel, and we were getting all this intelligence about what was going on in Israel long before the press had it or anybody else knew about it. And that was the only time I really got concerned, because in the Yom Kippur War, the Arabs had Soviet air defense missiles, and they were shooting down a lot of Israeli planes. And so air defense became a very important aspect of that war. And so the Israelis wanted more air defense, and so they were talking about, sending Hawk batteries to Israel to defend Israel. And so I actually packed my toothbrush. I thought we were on our way. The Hawk missile, most people know what the Hawk missile is, but a lot of people know what the Patriot missile is. And the Patriot missile was in the Gulf Wars, was shooting down a bullet with another bullet. Well, there's a Patriot missile, and then the next missile system before that was called Improved Hawk, and the missile system before that was called Hawk. So the Hawk missiles was a forerunner of the Patriot missiles.
I'm sure it operates differently, but what similarities would we know as civilians, or what would we notice differently about them?
Well, it's really technical.
Okay.
The Patriot missile is way in advance. This is public knowledge. The Hawk missile, the big problem with missiles is you have to guide that missile to the target. And there's a number of ways of doing it, but the way the Hawk missile did it, it would illuminate the target with RF energy, and then when you launch the missile would find that reflection and track it and go right to it. Well, that kind of a system is very easy to electronically jam. So you can fake it out. You can fake out. So my radar that's tracking that enemy target, you can fake it out real easy with electronic countermeasures. And all they really have to do is figure out what frequency you're illuminating him with, and then you can either emit a different frequency and fake out the missile, and the missile will miss you, or because it was a continuous wave, that target has to have a closing velocity on your position. So if that target then goes into and flies parallel to your position, you lose track, and you can't shoot them down. The Patriot missile has an array of radars. You've probably seen pictures. They have this big truck that has a big flat screen that comes up, and on that screen there's a whole bunch of radars, all at different frequencies. And these radars, then they have this big computer that constantly changes the frequency, so the guy can't figure out how he's tracking you. So with the advent of computers, and high-speed computers, and our computer technology allowed us to do that. So it's very easy now or it's very hard for the enemy to fake out your radar. So therefore you can track the target, now you can guide the missile to the target. So it's a big technology step change. So in our Hawk batteries we had all these radars and all these launcher sections, these launchers, and everything was connected with cables. In order to put our battery on the road, we had like 50 trucks. The new Patriot missile, I think the battery's only got 5 trucks. And everything's on these great big semi-trucks, and they just roll in. The missiles are in tubes and just long. So it's a big technology change.
What other things were you involved in your service? Especially you had quite a long career there. What other things did you do that were not necessarily related to this, or were they all related to this?
Well, when I worked on the M1 tank, I did a lot of work on the 120 millimeter round that we fire out of the M1 tank. Okay. The M1 tank is Abrams tank. It was in development in that time. Has become from the Gulf Wars. People have seen pictures of these tanks. I don't know if you know anything about the first Gulf War, but the U.S. M1 tanks destroyed a lot of the Iraqi tanks, which were the T-72 tank from the Russians, before those tanks ever saw our tanks. And the reason is the technology that's in an M1 tank. So I worked a lot on the fire control. So we in firing these 120 millimeter kinetic energy rounds that what the round actually looks like. It's made out of depleted uranium, which is not radioactive, but it's dense like lead. And the actual round looks like a small missile. It's only about this long. It looks just like a rocket. And they fire that out of that gun at extremely high velocity. And they have fire control on it. They have laser range finders. They measure the temperature of the air, the temperature of the round. It's got all this computer stuff. So all you have to do is put your sights on the target. It calculates everything. First shot kill. And if you can kill a tank at extremely long ranges. Versus the Soviet tanks, I mean, their fire control was a guy looking in a sight, and he would look at his target and say, that's about 1,000 yards. Then he'd look in the sight and he'd look at the reticle and he'd find the 1,000-yard marker and he'd shoot. And then if he missed, he would see where it hit and then he'd adjust. Okay. So they used to say that the Russians were a 3-shot kill, because they have to fire 3 times before they hit you. And so that was the whole Russian philosophy. So they had at least 3 times as many tanks as we did, probably even more. And their tanks are cheap. They're much cheaper to make. But in the first Gulf War, the U.S. might have lost 1 or 2 tanks, destroyed all of the Iraqi tanks a lot of times before they were even saw. So it's a tremendous advantage.
Do they still have that leading edge, or has there been a great deal of adaptation on the other side so that they are more effective in striking our forces back?
I don't know, I've been out of it since the early 90s. I suspect that they have made some advances in their fire control and their tanks. But now the U.S. has made, and Israel and Britain and usually the Western countries have made tremendous advances in the armor protection on our tanks. So it continues to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone to do all this stuff around stealth and so it's really interesting. I mean, the whole philosophy of war is different with the Soviets and the Iraqis and the Iranians too. They believe in overwhelming you with numbers, and they don't have the value for life that we do in the U.S. So we have a lot of things in our tanks that are designed to protect our people. Like where they store all the rounds is in a magazine on the back of the turret. If a round were to hit in there, the thing is designed to blow up so it doesn't blow the tank out. So there's a lot of things, the armor on our tanks, the stealthiness of our tanks, where the Soviet tanks is typically a low silhouette, cheaply made tank, and they just have thousands of them.
What else would you like to discuss about your time in? I know you have quite a lengthy service time, so I want you to be able to spend time where you would like to on discussing your service.
Well, I never regretted going in the service. I enjoyed it. Got to see a lot of interesting things, meet a lot of different people. I was married at the time. We lived in Germany for 3 years on a concern, they called it over there. Our oldest son was born in Germany. The military life is what's unique about military life is the camaraderie, and that's, I think, what attracts a lot of people, because you're with a group of people, you have a lot of camaraderie, you do a lot of things together, you form friendships that last the rest of your life, versus a civilian occupation. A lot of times you don't have that camaraderie. You move around a lot. It's different. You don't a lot of times don't associate with people you work with. Some people, but so there's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of when you would come to a new assignment, everybody was always willing to help you. I had a friend once who went to a new assignment and was moving into a house, and the people there had filled his refrigerator with food for him, and so they didn't have to go buy food. They didn't know where to shop for food. So there's just a lot of that kind of. It's a big family kind of thing. That's why it's so important to I think to take care of our military resources and use them wisely.
And you did receive the rank of Lieutenant Colonel was your highest rank, is that
Yes.
correct? What other duties did that involve as far as, was it mostly administrative duty? Or in that position, what were your duties?
Well, I never was being a MOBDES officer, I only worked basically 2 weeks out of every year, never did any weekend stuff. And so there was no, commanding a unit or something. But I would be in a position to do that in case there was an activation. So, so the 2 weeks, there's a lot of just getting acquainted with the people and understanding what everybody does, and then do some kind of project, something you could complete in 2 weeks. So did a lot of looking at, working on that. Did a lot of years spent working on that tank. And and then at the Missile Intelligence Center, worked on a lot of highly classified stuff on missile technology and what's going on around the world with missile technology. So it's quite interesting, very interesting what all these weapons that people are coming up with.
And you said you worked at Procter & Gamble then when you retired from the military, and
Well,
then...
I started Procter & Gamble in 1976.
Okay.
So as I was working at Procter & Gamble, I would do these 2 weeks in the summer and the reserve thing. And then I retired from P&G in 2006. One of the interesting things was as a field grade officer, which is major and lieutenant colonel and colonel, I went to the Army Command and General Staff School, and this was during the 1980s, and there was a lot of General Colin Powell was the, I guess you call it the chief of staff then. But anyway, there was a lot of what went wrong in Vietnam kind of thing going through the senior staff colleges. And we had to read a book called On War by Clausewitz. And Clausewitz was a Polish nobleman in the Napoleonic Wars, and he wrote this book about the use of military power. And it became very popular in the business schools, in the Harvard and Yale business schools, because it talked about, you know, committing your resources to go do something and going to win, and how you should do that, how you should think about that. And so this whole idea of if you're going to go do something, if you're going to do war, it's very, very serious business, and you're actually going to kill people, and you better be able to explain why you want to do that in a language that everybody can understand and agree with, and you need to go to win. And the go to win piece is like the business schools, you know, it's like, so you don't go into an initiative, well, I'm doing this because, well, you don't have baked ideas. You go, you have a good idea, and you commit all of your resources and money to win. And which is a lot of discussion right now about in Iraq, you know. I mean, did we really go into Iraq to win? And, you know, McCain said, you know, we should have put more people in there, and so you get it. So then all the politics enters into this, and it becomes a very, very interesting discussion today, based upon what we learned in Vietnam and what the senior staff colleges are teaching our senior officers about going to win, and then we end up in another political war 20 years later. I mean, it's how does that happen?
So it's like you can't really conduct what you've been trained to do, more or less, or to some degree, because of all the politics involved.
Politics enters in, that's right, all the politics involved.
How do you feel about the current conflict, or do you care to comment?
Well, I mean, what I was taught, you know, you go to win, and why didn't we go to win? So, you know, why did we not put all the troops in there that we needed to? And then we get all the politicians who are entering into it saying we shouldn't be there, we should be there. Why are we there? I went and asked our Congressman Jean Schmidt had an open forum down in Maineville, and she had one of her lieutenants there, and I went and asked her, what are we doing there? You know, what's our objective? I would think my congressman would be able to tell me that, and they can't. Well, what she said was, we went in there because they had weapons of mass destruction. I said, well, did they find any? No. Well, then so, well, what are we doing there? So it goes to that. It goes to the fundamental, and I think that's one of the reasons we have such a big political debate about this now, is back to Clausewitz, you better be able to explain why. And if you can't, then it's corrupt, and then you have all these problems. So,
What else would you like to bring forward about your time or anything else related to your time? At this time, I know you said you had one child born in Germany. Did you have more children?
yeah, we have a second child. Our daughter was born here in Cincinnati.
Okay. And so, how about the effects on your family life? Were they, how were they impacted by your service, or?
Not very much,
Okay.
because I only spent 2 weeks in the summer. Yeah, it impacted them not very much at all. And when we were first married in Germany, because we were in that missile law, I had to pull a lot of duty, so I was separated from Karen a lot. Usually I would spend, out of every 3 days, you spend only one night at home, so that was difficult. And you know, she's over there by herself, no family, and we just had a few, acquired some new friends over there. Like I said, friends that we still keep in touch with to this day. So.
Do you still get together, just email, or?
We've gotten together with them, and you know, exchanged Christmas cards and you know, family events and stuff like that. We haven't physically seen them in a couple of years, and one of the reasons for that is because when Procter and Gamble, we were lived in Japan for 5 years, so we were, you know, physically in Asia. So, so but we still kept in touch.
Are there any moments that really stand out in your memory about your time in the service, a particular incident or a highlight that you recall?
Well, the Yom Kippur War was scary in 1973. Yeah.
And you never had to actually mobilize, but you just felt like you could at any moment.
Right. Well, it was over in like 7 days, I think, something like that. So, yeah. Yeah, we were all in an increased state of alert. The Arabs came very close to well, for a moment there they did. Then Israel recovered.
And then anything else that you would like to discuss?
No, no.
Okay. I want to make sure that we've hit everything that you needed to bring out today. Anything else that you can recall or would like to make mention of?
Well, I just one more story. The funny thing is, so I went on active duty in 1971, which was sort of, I'll call it the middle of the Vietnam War, because that ended in what, 73,
I think it's
73, and then South Vietnam fell in 75, I believe. And then, so this is 1975, the North Vietnamese overrun South Vietnam, and it all becomes Vietnam. And this is 75. In 1995, 20 years later, I was in downtown Ho Chi Minh City, building a new shampoo plant to sell shampoo and beauty aids to the Vietnamese. And what was interesting about it all is that in 20 years, I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but something like 80% of the population of Vietnam was less than 20 years old. So they didn't even remember the war. And Vietnam today is, I like to tell people, is more capitalist than we are. And they're more energy conscious, and they're more recycle. They recycle everything. So we built this plant right on the outskirts of Ho Chi Minh City, and one night the project manager invited. He was living there. I would just come in and help with the technical issues and then leave. But he would he would come in. Or at night we would leave. We left the plant, and he took me to this apartment that he was living with his family, right on the Saigon River, and it's just beautiful. Oh, just beautiful. And the apartment complex was, you know, just as modern as anything else you can imagine. And sitting out on, and everything was green, and there was a big swimming pool out there, and these guys were, Vietnamese, were serving us hamburgers. So we're sitting out there eating hamburgers and drinking beer, and it got to be about, oh, I don't know, midnight or so, and I said, well, I got to get back to the hotel. And he had no problem, and he had this guy down there at the river in a boat, and so he took me down to the river and put me on this boat, just me, and went down this boat at midnight down the Saigon River, and you see these water hibiscus floating in the river, and you look along the sides of the river, and there's these campfires, you can see fires burning, and you know, I thought all I needed was a Rolling Stones, and I was in Apocalypse Now, and took me right down downtown Ho Chi Minh, got off, and walked to my hotel. It was really a out of mind experience. You know, it's just unbelievable. And Vietnam is a very interesting place. The currency of Vietnam is dong, and so at the hotel I had $100 US, and so I wanted some local currency. So I exchanged my $100, and they gave me 1.4 million dong. 1.4 million. I had a big wad.
Did that go a long way?
Yeah. 1.4 million dong. So then when you leave the airport, you have to pay an airport tax. All the countries in Asia do this. So you go through, you get your ticket and your boarding pass, and you have to go through security, and then you have to go through the immigration, and they check your passport, check all your documents. And when you get through that, then you have to go sit up, and you have to go and pay your airport tax. Well, they would only collect the airport tax in U.S. dollars. They wouldn't accept dong. I said, well, wait a minute, this is the Vietnamese government. Why don't you accept your own currency? So you had to pay $8 US to pay that tax to be able to get on the plane. And the only country was like it. Everybody else would accept, you know, Thailand. Everybody would accept their currency, except Vietnam. They wanted US money. It was really something. But and Ho Chi Minh City is just a beautiful city. You can see, probably back in the 1950s and 1960s, before all this happened, it's big, wide boulevards with big palm trees and wide streets, and these French-style architecture with all these pastel colors. Just gorgeous. Just a gorgeous place. Yep. I didn't get to Hanoi though. Hanoi is way up north, but Ho Chi Minh, way down south, is it's a beautiful country, very beautiful. There's just so many shades of green in Vietnam, and you know, and then I spent a lot of time in Thailand, which is not very far, and Thailand's a little bit different. I mean, I didn't see all the fields and the rice paddies, and of course we spent all the time in Bangkok, and Bangkok is a very modern city, so.
And is there anything that we have overlooked today?
Nope.
Okay. Do you feel like we've covered the material?
Sure.
Okay. All right, then we'll conclude today. This is September 5th, 2008, Mary L. Cook Library with Bernnie, Leland. Thank you.